There's also Sony wanted to acquire Kadokawa Corporation, who most gamers know them as the parent company that owns like majority of From Software, but they're also known for their light novels, visual novels, manga, anime, basically all of that stuff. And there's a lot of concerns that, Sony would own From Software and force From Software to publish games exclusively for PlayStation. That would suck.
I mean,
but at the
that's not really my main concern with Kadokawa. Like yeah, they would own FromSoft and they make some of the biggest games now, like with the whole Souls-like genre. But there are so many people that don't care about the Souls-like genre, and I'm not one that cares about it. I'm not really concerned with them owning From Software, especially with Xbox basically buying up some of the biggest companies on top of that. I feel like if they just bought From Software, it would be fair game with what Xbox is doing. I would say the monopolization of the anime industry is much bigger.
I agree.
And that's something I would like to avoid.
You want to talk about the fastest way to burst the bubble is monopolies.
Yeah,
So-
it would not be good.
So there's been a plot twist recently suggesting that Kadokawa actually approached Sony because they wanted to block a hostile takeover from Kakao Corporation, a Korean mega conglomerate that does a lot of things, but they're also mostly known for like their webtoons, which are like Korean vertical comic strips, and also K-pop, of course.
See, I would actually rather Kakao take it over, just based on my limited knowledge of all of this. I think I would feel better about Kakao taking it over Sony. Like, yeah, Sony would. Sony is more integrated into that industry, but I think that's actually more scary because it would be more of a monopolization since Sony's already in the industry, whereas Kakao, it doesn't sound like they would be monopolizing on really any of it. Like, it doesn't, from what you said, it doesn't sound like they do much with video games or with anime. So it sounds like it would still be pretty separate from like, a bigger company that's already doing it holding them.
And in terms of video games, Kadokawa also owns Spike Chunsoft. They're best known for making Danganronpa. They've also developed the first few Dragon Quest games alongside Enix back in the day, and also very recently Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So there's a lot. So there's a lot Sony gains if they were to buy Kadokawa. Of course, yes, From Software, Spike Chunsoft. Another means of distributing anime because I think they own Crunchyroll, which is like the biggest service. And
Crunchyroll is already a monopoly now.
In the West, yes.
Yeah, I guess in the West, but that's the only way I can. That's the only lens I can view it from. Bloodborne is already Sony exclusive too, so them going to Sony makes some sense. With Sony they've done some bad decisions in the past year, so I'm a little worried about Sony. If it would have been like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe a couple more years ago, like I would be saying Sony, but it's a hard one.
See, I think unfortunately when it comes to like the video game sections of it, I can't really say, that Sony shouldn't be doing this because Xbox has been doing it themselves. I mean, they bought Bethesda and Activision. It's really hard to look at that and say, okay, well then Sony shouldn't do this because, Xbox has done it to a much bigger degree.
Xbox doesn't do exclusives as much though. Sony's a big
exclusive.
No,
that's the only other thing. PlayStation would do exclusives. But, that was one of the biggest concerns with Xbox taking over Activision that Sony kept trying to raise, is that some of the biggest series like Call of Duty would become Xbox exclusives. And, I think that I think Xbox would have done that if, if Sony didn't challenge them. I think they would have pushed for more like exclusives. At least in the beginning,
I think they're going to do
done that.
I think they're going to do more exclusives, but the problem is it's not very lucrative. If the more platforms you can be on, it's typically what's your drive? What's your future thing? With Microsoft and Xbox, like I'm thinking they want to be on more platforms than possible. That's why they're doing
Yeah.
their whole Game Pass thing. We'll see how that turns out, obviously, but it's not like Xbox is doing great right now, the Xbox system itself.
No, but they haven't been for a while. When it comes to the console race, PlayStation has been beating them ever since the 360 era. So I don't think Xbox is under the illusion that they can bring their hardware or like their console scene back. I think that's why they're so open to doing, putting their games on every single console so that they can recoup the cost as much as possible.
Yeah.
I don't see Sony doing that in any way whatsoever, regardless, because their consoles are still doing so well. Like, and then we have like, even with like a lot of Xbox games, I don't see much invasive parts of it, like what Sony's trying to do with like games that are coming to PC with like the PlayStation overlay and it not being supported on Linux, for instance.
Yeah.
But in the end, I don't care that From Software or even Spike Chunsoft would go to Sony. I think it's all fair game at this point, especially between the two companies. I think the biggest thing is the anime industry.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think From Software would make sense to go to, maybe if they even broke it off and sold parts of it to both. That could always be a thing that could happen depending on who wants what. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping From Software just stays From Software. But
yeah,
are they publicly
great
traded?
to go independent.
No, they're owned by wait, never mind. So yeah, they are publicly traded. They're
majority
company.
owned by Kadokawa. Sony already owns a part of FromSoft, and I think Tencent owns the rest of it.
Tencent
But Kadokawa owns like 80% of it.
Yeah, so because Sony owns some of it, there's even more drive that they'll probably end up with it, honestly. They'll have a lot of say because they have ownership with that type of thing.